Hi folks, and welcome to another First Impressions of a Clan Wars reward tank. This time we're looking at another Tier 10 American medium tank. This one is the M60. It's not the T95 E6 that I covered on a previous video. These videos are courtesy of Beyond D, lending me his account for the day. I basically played all the Clan Wars reward tanks, but because of time problems, I basically didn't spend that much time in very many of the tanks, and consequently some of the games are not amazing. This is my first game in the M60 on getting access to Beyond D's account for the day, so it's not an amazing result, and it's ENSC, which means I don't get off to show or don't get to show off the amazing gun depression, 9 degrees of gun depression that this tank has. But it does give me an opportunity to talk about the history of the M60 because it's very, very interesting, and I actually learned a lot, something I probably should have known, but I didn't, and I'm going to be sharing that with you. Just a moment in history that changed tank warfare forever that I wasn't aware of. But yep, we're going to talk about that. But this is a Clan Wars reward tank, as I say. It basically comes up against the it's another Tier 10 American medium, so it's up against the M48 Patton. So we might as well do a side-by-side comparison between this and the M48 Patton. So what are the major differences between the Tier 10 Clan Wars reward and the regular M48A1 Patton in-game? Well, first of all, we can see under firepower, we've got more DPM on the Patton. It's got a better reload and a rate of fire as a result, so the DPM is very, very good on the M60, but the Patton has it beaten. Okay, so when we come down to weapons handling, okay, it looks like, well, the weapons handling on the Patton is one of the best weapons, or it's one of the best guns. The weapon handling on the Patton is probably one of the best guns in World of Tanks. And believe it or not, the M60 has it beaten, so I would say that possibly the M60 has the best gun handling of any Tier 10 in the game. The aim time looks amazing. It's better than the Patton's. Accuracy is better than the Patton's. Dispersion while moving, firing on the move during traverse is the same, but point 10 is just amazing on either tank. It's even got slightly worse turret traverse accuracy while turning the turret, but not by much. Point 10 is still incredibly good. It's got better accuracy after firing, 3.5 compared to 4, and the rest of the stats are identical, but not quite, because both tanks have 9 degrees of gun depression. So the gun depression of both tanks is very, very good, but something you need to be aware of is the gun depression over the rear of the tanks is different. So the M48A1 Patton, when you're pointing the gun over the rear of the tank, only has 4 degrees of gun depression, and the M60 is worse. When you're pointing the gun over the rear of the M60, it only has 1 degree of gun depression. So yeah, 1 degree of gun depression means if you're in a low profile tank and you're coming up against an M60, get to its rear, it's very, very unlikely that the M60 is going to have the gun depression to be able to kill you without having to turn the tank in order to get better gun depression. So yeah, only 1 degree of gun depression over the rear of the tank compared to 4 on the Patton. So slight difference there where the Patton has an advantage. When it comes to movement, you can see that the M60 is actually slightly better. It's got a slightly better top speed, even though it doesn't have the same horsepower engine. It doesn't have as good a horsepower to weight ratio. It's very, very close, but you can also see the terrain resistance is better on the M60. So again, overall, I think the maneuverability of both tanks are quite close because of this terrain resistance, but according to other sources, and again, I only spent 2 games in the tank, and this is the first game I played in a tank, you know, people seem to reckon the M60's mobility is probably a little bit better than the Patton's, but I didn't get to experience that. What you can see is the turret traverse is slightly better than the Patton, and the hull traverse is slightly better than the Patton, so people say that maybe the mobility is slightly better than the M48A1, but I don't know. And another thing you need to be aware of is that while the mobility looks okay compared to the Patton is not considered a very mobile Tier 10 medium tank. Most other Tier 10 medium tanks for other nations are faster, have more mobility, have better acceleration, so both the M60 and the M48A1 Patton aren't particularly mobile as Tier 10 medium tanks. When we come to armor and health, what we can see is the hull armor on the M48A1 is much, much better than it is on the M60. We've got 152 compared to 93. Now, that's something that I'm a little bit annoyed about, because this is the M60. There are lots of variations, I'll get into those in a moment, of the M60, but this is the original M60 according to Wargaming. We'll pop here. The M60 is a gift tank rewarded to players for finishing top places in the Clan Wars reward tanks. That's fine, but this is what annoys me here. Is the M60 is a representation of the first production variant of the M60. So it was called the M60 because it went into production in 1960. But this should not be confused with the M60A1 and later variants. So this apparently is the M60, not the M60A1. And that is why I have a problem, because the M60, the original M60, had 150 millimeters of frontal armor. The frontal armor on the M60 was better than it was on the Patton. It had 150 millimeters of frontal armor. So if it is the M60, then it should have 150 millimeters of frontal armor. And Wargaming are saying it's the first production variant of the M60. It's the M60. They're saying it's not the M60A1, it's not the M60A2, or it's not the M60A3. But as I say, the problem is the M60A1, A2, and A3 all had their frontal armor reduced from 150 down to 93. So the hull armor on this tank is the M60A1. It's the M60A2. It's the M60A3. It's not the M60, regardless of what Wargaming are saying. It had 150, but we're getting off the point. I tend to just wander on when I'm talking about tanks I love. But yeah, 93 millimeters frontal armor means that the frontal armor is not as good as it is on the Patton. Other major differences, the view range is absolutely amazing. 420 meters of view range. So the camo rating here is 0. This is something that needs to be stressed. The camo rating on the M60 is absolutely terrible. It is far, far worse than the camo rating on the M48A1 Patton, because this is a medium tank. The M60 is a medium tank that's bigger than the Patton. It's also bigger than the M103 that it eventually replaced, the heavy tank. It's bigger than pretty much most of the heavy tanks in the game. So it's an incredibly big medium tank. It's a big target, and it has absolutely no camo rating. A couple of the weaknesses that the M60 has. So the camo rating is absolutely dreadful. The radio range is a little bit better than it is on the Patton. There's pretty much no other major differences. So essentially, what you're getting when you drive the M60 is a tank that has amazing view range, 420 meters of view range that can be exploited. It's got incredibly good gun depression of 9 degrees, although it drops to 1 degree over the rear of the tank. The gun is amazing. It has amazing gun handling. It's got good accuracy, penetration. The alpha damage is great. The hull traverse and mobility seem to be better than the Patton, even though the Patton has a better horsepower to weight ratio. The M60 has better ground resistance, but it's not all great, because the tank is particularly, it's American medium. It's not particularly fast for a tier 10 medium tank. The camo rating is absolutely dreadful. The tank is huge and it's a big target. The armor is really, really poor. We'll look at the armor now in a moment, and it's got this huge weak spot. So while it does have amazing gun depression, it's got this commander's cupola on top, although technically it's a machine gun port as opposed to commander's cupola. Later variants of the M60 had a separate cupola for the commander, but at the moment this is a commander's machine gun port, and it's a weak spot. This is a 50 cal machine gun, by the way. It doesn't have, or it has some problems, but it seems to be a very, very good competitive tank, even though, it's a premium tank or a Clan Wars reward tank. It actually seems to be very, very competitive against the regular tier 10 medium tank in-game, the M48 Patton. But I will say, as I discovered in my second game that I'm not going to be showing you, the armor is absolutely dreadful. As I say, you've got very, very poor hull armor. What you can see is the upper glacis is 93 millimeters thick, but it is very, very well sloped, and it gets you up to about 170 millimeters. But this is a tier 10, and basically tier 10s are going to have absolutely no problems penning the hull of this tank, and it's not historically accurate. If it is, as Wargaming say, it's the M60 and not the M60 variations, then it should have 150 millimeters of upper frontal plate, but not 93. 93 was on the later variations, but, we'll maybe let the chieftain talk about that when I have the next opportunity to talk to him. So next we've got the lower glacis, which basically moves from 192 right down to about 130 at the base of the glacis. You've got weaker sides as well at about 160 millimeters to the either side of the lower glacis. So the hull armor absolutely dreadful, and as you would expect from an American tank, the side armor not very good, the rear armor absolutely terrible. You've got this large weak cupola on top, and it's weak because the machine gun port is only 120, roughly about 120 millimeters thick, so pretty much any tank that shoots the Patton can shoot this and pen it. And because you've got 9 degrees of gun depression, you're going to be trying to use your gun depression in most of the games in the M60, or the M60 is going to be using its gun depression against you if you don't have the tank. Shoot the cupola, you're going to be able to pen this. It's going to be very, very hard for him to use his gun depression and hide his cupola at the same time without staying on the move. The turret armor, not amazing. It's got a very, very good gun mantlet, but you can see that plenty of tier 10s are going to be able to pen towards the side of the gun mantlet. You can get down to very, very weak 170 millimeters. Then you've got the gun mantlet itself, even the thicker armor outside the gun mantlet. It's going to be able to, some tier 8s might be able to pen this, but you shoot below the gun mantlet and you're going to be able to pen this with most tanks. The gun mantlet is very good though. You've got a very, very good gun mantlet, which 556, 400, 300, depending on where you shoot it. What's this weak spot? I didn't realize there was a weak spot beside the gun. Wow, okay. Right beside the gun, apparently, there is a weak spot. Can we see what that is? Yeah, it seems to be, there's a very, very weak spot right beside the gun on the gun mantlet. I didn't know about that. I'm going to have to exploit it next time I'm facing an M60. I mean, yeah, it's going to be difficult to hit this, but you got 125 to either side of the gun. But why have trouble aiming here when you can probably just, if you shoot here, you're probably going to be able to shoot here. And it's got weaker armor on the cupola. So maybe he's hiding it around a corner. Just shoot him directly at the gun. Yeah, you might be able to pen the M60. I did not know that, but you can see that basically the armor is not very, very good. So let's move on to the history of this incredibly successful design. The M60 became known as the main battle tank for America. It was the first tank that got the designation main battle tank. And in fact, even though a lot of people call it the M60 Patton, it officially wasn't a Patton. It was named the Patton, but not officially, because it succeeded it was the successor to the M48 Patton. But technically, it's just the M60 main battle tank. It's not actually the M60 Patton, as a lot of people call it. Patton is an unofficial designation for the tank, as I say, simply because it replaced the M48. But it also replaced the T95. Now, I covered the T95. The T95 series of medium tanks. It's another Clan Wars reward tank. I covered the T95 E6 in a previous video talking about Clan Wars reward tanks. In 1948, the Patton was being replaced by the T95 series of tanks in the early 1950s, but something happened that basically meant the T95 project was scrapped and the M60 was developed instead. Now, I went into all the history of the T95 during that particular video. You can check out the T95 E6 First Impression Clan Wars reward tank. That's up on the, I'll maybe put a link on screen for it now. But yeah, the M60, incredibly successful main battle tank for the Americans. There were over 15,000 of them built between 1960 and 1997. This tank remained in service right up till 1997. It fought in various conflicts, including the Gulf War and other conflicts around the world, because this was so successful that a huge, absolutely huge number of other countries have bought the M60, are using the M60. It's still in service in a lot of countries today as a main battle tank, but there's just too many countries to go into. But not only did the Americans build 15,000 of these tanks for themselves, there must be at least 10,000 M60s that were sold or were used by other countries. Now let's get on to where this tank came from, because this is something I couldn't believe I'd never even heard of. But during the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, basically the students rose up against the puppet Soviet government. And they were successful. They actually managed to oust the government. They took over government buildings. There were firefights. They took on the Hungarian army and some Soviet troops that were in Hungary at the time. But they succeeded in overthrowing the government. So as a result, the Soviets then unfortunately invaded Hungary with an army, including tanks, and they very, very brutally put down the revolution. There were over 2,500 civilians killed during the Soviet invasion, and they basically put the puppet government back in power. But during that conflict, a bunch of revolutionaries managed to capture a Soviet T-54A tank. Now, this is at the height of the Cold War. They managed to capture a T-54A and they drove it into the grounds of the British Embassy in Hungary, in Budapest. The tank subsequently was captured, and they basically, NATO took that tank back and put it under trials, put it under testing, because this is the first T-54 they actually managed to get their hands on. And they were very, very shocked, incredibly shocked. This is 1956, and they were incredibly shocked to find out that none of their tanks could pen a T-54A. It made them incredibly worried. The British Centurion couldn't pen a T-54A with its 20-pounder. The M48 Patton could not pen the T-54A with its 90mm. In fact, most NATO countries had 90mm on their guns, and they were completely ineffective against this new T-54A, and it was considered a big threat. So in the space of just about 6 months, the British developed a new gun. As a result, a direct result of capturing the T-54A, and this was the Royal Ordnance L7. In-game, we probably know it better as the rifled 105mm. They immediately started upgrading Centurions with this 105mm. They started developing new tanks that were going to use this 105mm, tanks like the Conqueror, and the Americans needed this gun, so they licensed the gun from NATO. They took this British gun back to the US, they renamed it the M69, and then immediately scrapped the T95 project, because the T95 project, most of those tanks were only using 90mm guns, the Pattons were only using 90mm guns, so they scrapped most of the future development of the Patton, they scrapped the new T95 medium tank project, and they began again from scratch, and they designed this tank using the M69, or the Royal Ordnance L7 105mm rifled gun. So this is a tank that went into development in 1957, just a year after the T-54A was captured. What they did was they basically took the Patton and they pretty much improved everything there was to improve about the Patton. They added a lot of new technology, changed the suspension, added a lot of aluminium armor or aluminum armor. The track wheels were aluminum. I believe one of the track wheels was aluminum. I need to check that up, but I don't get everything right. But one thing I do get right is that the M69 prototype, it was called the M69 prototype because of the M69 gun, had 150mm of frontal armor on the upper glacis. So this is one of the big improvements the M60 had over the Patton. The upper armor, or the frontal armor, was improved, and of course it got this new M69 gun, or the Royal Ordnance L7, depending on what you want to call it. It had lots of other upgrades. You could see this large square box here. This is an infrared searchlight, so it can basically spot tanks for night fighting. This large cupola was put on top, a machine gun port as opposed to a commander's cupola, so that it could have a 50 caliber machine gun. So there were a lot of improvements. It meant that the tank ended up being a lot bigger than the Patton it was replacing, but it successfully passed trials in 1959 and went into production in 1960. Because it went into production in 1960, it was then renamed the M60 and not the Patton. It was just the M60 and Main Battle Tank. It was the first tank that got the name Main Battle Tank for the US, and it eventually went on to replace the M103 heavy tank. So it was the Main Battle Tank and was very successful. However, in a big dose of real-world irony, the M60 only came into existence, was only developed because a T-54A was captured and presented to the British Embassy during the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. And while it was a successful tank, the M60 incredibly successful, dozens of variants, too many to name, dozens of countries around the world, in fact more than dozens of countries, incredibly successful tank around the world. So many nations use this tank or are still using it. The irony is that a lot of those nations didn't actually get the M60 from the US. They didn't actually buy the M60 from the US. They built them themselves, or they bought them from other countries who were building the M60. As I say, there's a huge dose of irony involved, because this tank only existed because of a T60 or T-54A that was captured. The M60 itself went into production in 1960, and in 1961, a crew, and it doesn't say where, but a crew basically hijacked an M60 just 1 year after it had been built and drove it across the border into Iran. So Iran use M60s because someone drove the tank across the border into Iran. It was captured. It was studied. The USSR borrowed the tank. They basically had a look at it, just like the NATO had done with the T-54A. They studied the M60, and then they helped Iran develop a tank building program in order to build an Iranian version of the M60. The Iranians then built them and then sold them to some other countries, and basically the world, in fact most Middle Eastern countries, seem to have used the M60 in one shape or form. Some bought from the US and some bought from Iran. So big dose of irony that a lot of countries are using the M60 because a crew defected with one and drove it across the Iranian border. Now, I don't have a lot of information about that incident. In fact, I looked at the map, and about the only country that had M60s and bordered Iran at that time was Turkey. So it's possible that the tank came from Turkey, but don't quote me on that. I have no idea. There's not a lot of information around the defection, but yeah, a lot of countries got their hands on the M60 because of defection, and the M60 only came into existence because basically it was, well, not quite a defection, but almost captured T-54A. But yeah, anyway, let's get on to this game. Yeah, I had no idea about that history, and it's amazing because basically all future tank development came about because of that captured T-54A. Tanks using the 105mm, tank projects being scrapped because of the captured T-54A, and I knew nothing about that. But we are here on Ensk. It's my first game in the M60, and we're gonna go now. I only got to play 2 games in this tank, and in the second game I realized my armor was absolutely dreadful. So the second game I only managed to do about 1500 damage, and then got eaten alive by scorpions and grills. So we're gonna move. We're playing here in Ensk, and what I'm gonna do is I know the tank has 420 meters of view range, so I'm moving to abuse my view range. Let's check the shooting, and oh, really unfortunate bounce on the side of a turret and an E5, but I don't seem to have been spotted. Now, I'm using Beyond D's setup here. I've got everything set up exactly the way Beyond D would use. Apparently Beyond D uses 30 rounds of heat and only 20 rounds of APCR. Very, I don't know whether that's a good loadout or a bad loadout. What's the penetration on the heat? You've got 330, 390, same as the Soviet tanks. You've got 268, 390 on the standard APCR. So same loadout as Beyond D. He's got quite a few HE shells as well. We've done a little bit of damage with a shot into an E100, and now I'm going for a blind track shot on a Jagdpanther E100. No idea whether or not that went in, but okay, so I'm trying to abuse my view range here, testing out the mobility of the tank. As I say, my first game of the tank, and I didn't know much about it. What I did know was that basically it was very, very similar to the Tier 10 pattern, so that means that the armor is not particularly good. I wasn't aware that the armor was worse. I know that the view range is pretty good, but yeah, the gun should be pretty good, so I'm expecting it to play a lot like the Tier 10 pattern. And I like the Tier 9 pattern, so that's what I was expecting. Oh, Skoda T50 must be on a reload. He didn't fire back. He's relocating. So yeah, I'm moving up through the middle because our team are dominating the 9-0 lines. A lot of their Tier 10s, as you can see from the minimap, have gone across into town. So we're dominating the 9-0 lines, and as a result, I'm moving up looking for shots. So you can see that you're going to see some gun handling here now because we pop out, and there is the Jagdpanther or Jagdpanzer E100. It's I'll get it right eventually, and what you can see is the reload quite good, and the snapshot, just being able to shoot again, shoot twice, being able to put a shot exactly where I aim. So I do reckon the gun handling felt very, very comfortable on this. It's supposed to be very good at shooting on the move, but I haven't had an opportunity to, so yeah, this isn't about the gameplay. As I say, this is simply my first game testing out the tank. I've got plenty of hit points, and I missed my shot in the move, or I think what I did was I hit a wreck, not realizing the wreck was in front of the Borsig. But I move in, get a shot, get to the side, do a little bit of ram damage. I'm gonna try and get the kill. No. Okay, so we're up to about 2.4k damage. And yeah, while it's not a particularly fast or mobile Tier 10 medium, it's okay. It will get you around. I haven't had a chance to use the gun depression, but we can flank. We can play it like a traditional medium. Get to the back, get to the rear of a T-34, and this guy's mine. I've got his turret traverse beaten. Get one more shot in. Don't set him on fire, and Yep, okay, we're up to 3.3k damage. So the Alpha, very, very nice. The maneuverability, turret traverse speed, the tank traverse speed all seem good. Another miss on the move, but I would never have gotten that anyway. But I make a mistake here because there are 3 tanks left down in the south of the map, but I decide to come over here in order to get a kill, and yeah, okay, so that was a mistake by me. What I should have done was I should have gone south, but I saw the tanks in the south being swamped by our team, and I thought I'd have more opportunity of getting some damage here, but in retrospect, I probably should have gone south. You know, I might have got more damage had I gone down south, but our team wrap up. Absolutely devastate the enemy team. We finish with a 15-4 win, but first game in the M60 and 3,304 damage, so not too shabby. I really, really do like the gun. I like the gun handling. So just a third class, nothing amazing, but it was my first game in the tank and it quite impressed me. I really, really enjoyed the gun. I thought the alpha damage, the aim time, the reload, they were all pretty good. And I haven't spent that much time. In fact, I haven't played any games in the tier 10, even though I have it, the tier 10 pattern, because I didn't realize you have to unlock the final gun on the tier 10 pattern in game, even though it's a tier 10, so I'm building up some free XP to do that before I start playing it. But if it's anyway similar to the M60, I'm going to quite look forward to. I like the tier 9 pattern. I'm going to like the tier 10 pattern, and the M60 seems to be a very, very similar tank with better gun handling, better mobility, but slightly worse armor and a much bigger weak spot on top. But yeah, we finished with not even top. We only finished with 706 XP, but yeah, as I say, happy with the damage, and I didn't get that much time in the tank, only played 2 games, but fired 11, hit 9. Disappointed that I actually missed 2, but I actually only missed 1. You know, I hit a wreck, which is my fault, and then I took a shot in the move, which didn't hit, but other than that, we hit all our other shots, so 9 hits and 8 penetrations, so yeah, the gun seems very, very good, and it's a tier 10, we earned 21,000 credits, so yeah, not an amazing game, but as I said, I didn't have time to spend that much time in each of the premium clan board reward tanks, but that was the M60. Very, very interesting tank, and as I say, the development of the M60 led to the cancellation of the T95. It basically led to the cancellation of the M103. It basically changed the face of tank warfare in a far bigger way than I ever suspected. Incredibly successful tank, manufactured in large numbers, used by used across the world by so many countries and still in use today, and it all came about because a T-54A was captured in Budapest during the Hungarian uprising in 1956, so yeah, very, very interesting history. Anyway, that's my first impressions, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.